Welcome back to another episode of the At Heart Branding Podcast, episode number 3. Now, this is going to be an episode about the third and final major pillar of the At Heart brand clarity process, your brand story. It brings everything that we've talked about the last 2 episodes together and creates a clear and effective messaging tool for your brand. It's the brand story. So we're going to chat with Shawna Robinson once more. And as you may remember on the last episode, she's worked with countless brands, writing their brand story with their voice, and is now doing it every single day with her own small business. So we're going to pick her brain a little bit more about the importance of a brand story and the importance of having a consistent brand story. It ends up being the main messaging tool that you can use for your brand to ensure that your story is consistent every single time you tell it, no matter whether it's on social media, in an email campaign, in an advertisement, or even in an elevator pitch, right? These are the tools that you're going to be able to use to make sure that your brand messaging is crystal clear. So without further ado, let's dig into this episode and this interview with Shawna Robinson, part 2. Here we go. Awesome. Well, we are back for another episode of the At Heart Branding Podcast, and Shawna Robinson is joining us again. How are you, Shawna?
I'm awesome. Thank
Good.
you for having
Long
me.
time no talk.
I know.
It's been so long. Last episode we talked about voice and the importance of a personality in a brand. And now I really want to dig in with you about implementing that voice, implementing that personality through story.
Yes.
And I mean, you've written just a few stories here and there and understand what actually creates a compelling story. So why, again, we'll kind of reintroduce you to the listeners. Can you tell us a little bit more about Everyday Icing and kind of what you're working on right now?
Sure. Well, I spent the early part of my career as a copywriter telling stories for other people's brands and reached a point in my life where I'm like, no, I got my own stories that I need to tell. So a year ago, I launched Everyday Icing, everydayicing.com, which is a subscription-based website where I write one read-aloud story per week. It's either 5, 10, or 15 minutes to read aloud. And it's all about allowing children and adults to connect with each other and really enjoy story time.
Right. I love it. I think it's really cool. And what's interesting is there's no pictures. There's no videos.
That's right. There's no pictures because no adult is ever going to create a story or create an image better than what a child can imagine in their own head. And part of why I wanted to create the platform, why it's digital, is because we all have digital devices.
Right.
And so why don't we use them for good instead of evil and use them as a tool to connect?
For sure.
So all of my stories in this digital library, they're all online, easy.
That's really, really cool. Well, I think we're going to dig more into kind of the Everyday Icing story concepts in a little bit, but I'd love to kind of pick your brain about the process that you had gone through, implementing individual voices for multiple brands, but also telling individual stories for multiple brands. And kind of how are you managing the structures of all of these different stories and kind of keeping them aligned and what did you find kind of the most important pieces to that process?
Well, in the previous podcast, we did talk about how there were times in my career where I would have 6 or 8 different clients in a day. I'd work on assignments for, multiple different clients. In the previous podcast on voice, we talked about a really powerful tool, which was the voice filter.
For sure.
So I would encourage all you listeners to go and
go back and listen if you're jumping ahead.
That's right. Go back and listen to that podcast. There's some really great information there. So to tell stories, that's a great place to start with your tone and style of your story. And then the next place, believe it or not, it's about key messages. Right? If we have a story that we want to tell, we need to be consistent with that story so that our audience has a very clear picture of who we are as a brand or as a business.
Right.
And so a really, really simple, valuable tool is key messages. every strategy document that I've ever worked on in an agency has key messages, either
Right.
related to the brand, the business, or the specific product or service that we need to be speaking about. And that is, to me, one of the most powerful tools for making sure that the story that you're telling is consistent and compelling.
Right, absolutely. And I think, we may pull a play out of the Building a Story Brand book by Donald Miller that's sitting right up there because I love
Genius
it so
book.
much. Absolutely.
Me too.
Where do you feel the brand fits into a customer story? Because I think the traditional idea is that we're the brand, we're the hero, we're the most important piece of our own story. But I would agree, and I think you would agree, that it's not necessarily
That's
that way.
not the case.
Yeah.
No, I think the customer is totally the hero.
Right.
And the brand plays a supporting role in a story that supports them on their journey. And so I think we need to be aware of making sure that the story that you're telling is relevant,
Right.
that it is of service in some way, that it maybe solves a problem or makes their life easier. And so that brand story needs to be very customer centric and very customer focused.
Right. And how important is it actually defining who that customer is? Because I think one of the biggest things is some small to medium-sized businesses think they need to speak to everybody and everybody's their customer. But how important is it to actually narrow that down into
super duper important? Because I think we all want to speak. We all want to, have a microphone, not a big giant loudspeaker, and blasting it out, right?
For sure.
You want to make sure that what you're saying is being heard. And so, I'll say it again, you can't be all things to all people, nor do you want to be. But I think as, entrepreneurs and small business owners, you're like, I want to get my message out to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
But you don't. You want to get it to as many people who are, find what you're offering relevant or interesting or meaningful to what they're doing. So don't waste your efforts on, it's like, don't date the person who's not into you, right? Like, I think that's what it comes down to.
Exactly. And so obviously you're writing at least a story a week,
Yeah.
if not more. And, just before we hit record, we talked about the importance of the structure of a story and how the parallels actually kind of match alongside with the brand story. Can you speak to what some of those kind of traditional tools are within creating a compelling story?
Totally. Well, I'm really excited to say at this point that we're recording the podcast, I've got 55 stories that I have written and loaded to the digital library.
That's
so
amazing.
Pretty excited about that. And when I sit down to write a story, and when I think, the parallels with a brand story, there are some similarities. The first one is that you have a hero.
Right.
There has to be some kind of a character, a compelling character that we all want to get to know and love. And as we mentioned earlier, in the case of a brand, that's your customer. Right? We are endeared to them. They are the people that engage with our services. We are endeared to our heroes. Okay. There needs to be some kind of a struggle or a challenge. Right? So what's the problem? What is it that is making their life difficult or challenging? What is it that they don't even know that they are struggling with that you can help solve? So there needs to be some kind of a challenge. And then along the way, there's typically some kind of a situation experience. It could even be a person that guides them through this journey and helps them overcome the challenge and reach a new and ideal state of being. Maybe there are some lessons learned along the way. Oftentimes with a brand, that can be through an experience, maybe a customer service experience, maybe hands-on use of that product that sort of gives them a learning that helps them transform to reach a different state.
Yeah, their desired outcome.
Yes, the desired outcome. Right. All these different words for the same things.
Absolutely.
But certainly those would be some similarities and parallels between
that's
stories.
Yeah, which I completely agree. I think that's when I think we had that conversation a few months ago about how kind of it was such a light bulb moment of going, that is the structure that should be implemented everywhere. It should be consistent across the board, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you go about implementing, your own brand story through social media, through all the other, communications mediums that are out there, whether it be for brands previously or now?
Yeah, well, I'll speak to my experience now because it's a little bit different, and some listeners might be able to relate. I am sort of living my brand story.
Right.
So I am a mother of 2. I read a lot of stories to my own daughters. So in many ways, my life and my lifestyle is that of the heroes that I want to connect with.
Right.
So in order to tell my brand story to connect with them, it's about being relatable and it's about being authentic. And it's about sharing how I'm engaging with the stories and what it takes to write them and create them, and creating a story that people can relate to. Like you're stuck in the doctor's office and the kids are going crazy and they have only Reader's Digest, but your kids are not old enough to read Reader's Digest.
Right.
So I can pull out my phone and I can read them a story.
Yeah.
So my brand story is intimately connected to the journey that I would like to take my hero customers on.
Right.
And for some other small to medium-sized businesses who may not do that or may not have that same, they may not be living the life of their customers, I would say make sure that the story that you're telling is one that you believe in.
Right.
It's one that you can back up with your words and your actions.
Absolutely.
It may not be how you live, but it's something very authentic.
Yeah, well, and I think, like I told you, that's exactly why I named the company At Heart, because I think there's a lot of disingenuous marketing out there to a large extent, and it's more focused on sales, which obviously everybody needs to make money, but it's not necessarily focused on helping people solve their problems.
Correct.
Which I think is the most compelling story, is actually helping people.
Absolutely.
Right, which comes across as most genuine. How important is the consistency of your story? Because I think that's another piece that, you know, some small businesses, they just throw stuff on social media for the sake of having content there.
Yeah.
But sometimes the story and the thought behind what you're saying and why you're saying it doesn't necessarily align. How important is it to actually write down that story and have it be consistent?
Critical. Absolutely critical. Earlier we talked about the importance of key messages, and I would say every 6 months, every year, reviewing those key messages and making sure that they are still true.
Right.
And then working backwards from there, or actually working forwards from there, making sure you've got those key messages and looking at all of your mediums and say to yourself, do a little audit, are we saying the same things the same way in different channels?
Right.
Because that's where you get consistency of story, is making sure that those messages that you have are consistent.
Right.
And it's really, really easy to freak out and say, I should be doing this on social media. I need to be updating this. I must be there and present and have this stuff out there.
Yeah.
But it does not matter if it is not telling a consistent story. It can actually do, I believe, more harm than good.
For sure. Yeah, and I think the implementation is an interesting topic, which, you know, we're going to talk about in the rest of the season of the podcast now that we've kind of gone through the 3 main pillars. But I mean, you do an incredible job of actually implementing through social media, even as like a solopreneur who's kind of doing it herself. I have massive respect for being on Instagram stories, and, you know, you've got your posts for every story on your actual feed and stuff. What are some of the strategies that you use to actually implement your brand story through social media, for example?
Well, the first thing that I do is going back to that previous podcast.
Yeah.
I go back to my voice filter. Am I showing up in a way that is aligned with my values?
Right.
So that's a critical part of my story. So whether it's a visual, whether it's a message or an Instagram story, am I aligned? Right. Are those key messages there? And then the second piece would be, am I engaging with my customers in a way that is going to make their life easier, better, or happier, more joyful? Because I think that's a big piece of these stories.
For sure.
So for me, it's always getting back to my customer, the community. Actually, in my language of Everyday Icing, it's not my customer, it's my community, because
Absolutely.
I want to build a community. So am I showing up for my community in a way that's authentic, aligned with my values, and in a way that's going to make their life easier?
Yeah. And what I also love from a mechanic standpoint of actually your implementation, you also have an aesthetic that matches what your story is and stuff too, right?
Yes.
If you think of every post, if you actually go and visit, what is it? Everyday Icing Stories?
Everyday Icing Stories.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
on Instagram, there you go. You'll see that you've structured it in a way that it's not going to be super complex to actually implement either.
Correct.
Right? the templates and the structure that you've built in beforehand actually makes that implementation a little bit easier because you have those pieces in place.
That's true.
Right?
And we spent a lot of time. I shout out to Ryan at Ghost Studios, who does all my design work. The one word that we really feel is a visual aesthetic for us is whimsical. So these are hand-drawn illustrations that are then put into the computer, and he does a phenomenal job of creating sort of the visual aesthetic that is the symbol or the trigger that we want to use to spark the imagination. But the format that we've created, 3 posts a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we have frequency. And then each week, it's just basically focusing on that week's story.
Right.
And then I supplement the story of the story.
story.
Right. With 2 simple things. Monday is #IWonderMonday, which is a question, a comment, or an idea about either the work that I'm doing, how you engage with Everyday Icing, or the story itself.
For sure.
And then #Feature Friday, which is calling out a story that may be buried in the library that I want people to read.
Right.
Or, my big standard poodle, who I believe gets 50% of the writing credits for this story, know, Ray recommends a story as well on Fridays.
That's cool.
So I have a very structured schedule, but it's all very intentional for the story that I want people to learn and know about Everyday Icing.
Right. And, I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but I'm interested, how do you approach the perfect customer story between the parent and the child that's actually potentially reading the story? I don't know, maybe seeing your social media posts and stuff like that. Like how do you manage those 2 different heroes, if you will, within your brand story?
If I look at the entire Everyday Icing toolkit, I feel like the work that I do on social media and sort of the external promotion of it is absolutely geared to the adult hero.
Right.
And so the adult hero, the problem that I want to solve for them is to know that everybody deserves to feel connected, right? You're busy. You've got a lot on the go. Your kids need to have a story.
Yeah.
But you deserve to feel that connection. So here are some tools that are going to help alleviate that feeling of, I don't know how I'm going to make this all fit.
Yeah.
You deserve it, and I will give this to you in a very simple package.
Right.
The child hero, that's where I feel high pressure work of writing a story comes in.
Yeah.
And so I need to make sure that the words that I choose to put on a page, the characters that I create, the story that I build every week is honoring my child heroes. And they want to get lost in a story with someone they love. I think every child deserves that and wants that feeling, to feel that they are in a magical little world and supported to be there. And so, I think you have to look holistically at all pieces of your business.
Yeah.
Mine's unique in that I have 2 very distinct heroes, as you said.
Yeah.
But look holistically at all of those tools and identify which ones solve which needs.
Right. Yeah. Which I think is incredibly important. And I love that you have a different approach for each too, right? And understanding kind of where each
fits in,
piece fits in, and where each hero fits in.
Yeah.
And kind of last question before we kind of wrap up the story piece, but is there any piece of a brand story that you feel is most overlooked by a marketing manager or a communications department, or even a solopreneur if they're writing their own copy on their website? Is there anything that you feel is kind of the most overlooked part of a brand story?
That is a really good question. I think 10, 15 years ago, you would never hear a company in their brand story talk about why it started. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think now with, these trends and themes on social media about being authentic and documenting your story,
right,
and being able to really bring your heroes into your experience, I would not overlook the importance of your why.
Right.
And why are you doing this? Why has it started? Why do you believe there is a need for this in the world? Because I think we all want to understand where somebody is coming from. If you're talking to me and selling me something or offering me something, why you?
Right.
Why should I connect with you? Why does it matter that you and I enter into this transactional relationship?
For sure.
And so that element of why, I think, should be part of every brand's story.
Yeah.
Because we all, at the end of the day, I think, do care about that.
Absolutely.
Because that's a huge proof point for why your brand exists.
Absolutely. And I think like we put that at the very first part of our process, at least
Yes.
in the spirit of the brand. And I think it's a great tie that it does affect the story.
Absolutely.
But it also affects your internal every day, right? Whether you're a solopreneur, it's like, why am I waking up in the morning?
Yeah.
It's a big motivational piece, but it also is a great clarity piece for why
Yeah.
somebody should work with you, which is
Absolutely.
awesome. Perfect. Awesome. Well, again, where can everybody find you and where can everybody find Everyday Icing?
Yes. So everydayicing.com is the website where you can sign up for a 2-week free trial to explore all of these magical stories in the library.
55 of them now?
Yeah, currently there's 55.
Nice. There's going to be more.
And they're all sorted by time. So if you only
Perfect.
have 5 minutes, I promise you will have a really great 5-minute story. And then on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, you can find me at Everyday Icing Stories.
Awesome.
And every week, like we said, you will have a preview of what that week's story is going to be about. And stories are live every Thursday in the library.
That's awesome. And like you said, if you have a kid out there and you want to read them a story, you also have a 2-week free trial,
2-week
right?
free trial. Absolutely. And so you have full access with the 2-week free trial as well. So it's not like
awesome.
you only get 5 stories.
Yeah.
You get all 55.
That's perfect. Well, if you've got a little one at home and you need to read them a story from the master, go to everydayicing.com and do that. But thank you so much, Shawna, for joining me and chatting about story. And I am sure we will have you on very soon.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Thank you again to Shawna Robinson for taking the time to be on the At Heart Branding Podcast for not only 1 episode, but 2, and for sharing her knowledge both in personality of a brand and a brand's story. So I think there was a lot of incredible information that she shared with us over this episode, and I believe really, really has a lot of merit to it when it comes to marketing your very own small to medium-sized business. Remember that Shawna is offering a 2-week free trial on Everyday Icing, where she shares a weekly story for you to share with your child. It's an amazing platform and a very great way to connect with your child. So please head over to everydayicing.com and start your free trial today. So if you feel that you are needing some support with your marketing and your branding and putting a really clear, cohesive, effective plan together for your business, please be sure to head over to atheart.co. And either myself or one of our brand coaches would be happy to have a conversation with you to see if one of our private workshops, group workshops, or ongoing brand coaching services can really help you. You know, I believe that our process really encapsulates every single important piece of a brand and what makes it effective. So please feel free to head over to atheart.co, atheart.co, and fill out the contact form. We would love to chat with you. We would love to answer any questions that you may have, and we would love to help you optimize your marketing, clarify your brand, and take your business to the next level. So if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, please head over to atheart.co and contact us today.